Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Leftology Podcast. Today, I am joined by our new guest, Patrick, and our new host, Patrick. Not guest. Got my words mixed up. And then our guest that has been on the most, 100% of the times, it's isocratic.
Awesome.
I wanted to start us talking today. We had a very big Twitch stream happen this week, which it might not be very important on the large scale of politics, but it did get 400,000 views, which I believe is top 10, top 20 all time, with AOC playing Among Us with other Twitch streamers and Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really cool actually, because the internet's like so powerful when it comes to like political stuff. I think more so than people even give credit for. Like I still see people argue saying that like doing some sort of politics online isn't at all activism, but I totally disagree, because I think like the internet has such an influence on people's way of like thinking, and I think like it's just really interesting to see actual Congress people take this medium and use that to like, you know, get people to go vote or influence them on these political beliefs. And I actually hope this happens more often, because I think that'll get people more engaged with politics.
Yeah, I think not only was it huge outreach, but for me in particular, it did a lot to humanize those politicians. And like, it's like AOC was also on the past season of like RuPaul's Drag Race, and seeing her there and really helps you feel more connected to her. And I think a lot of people want more connection than just policy positions they like. They want people they like too.
Yeah, you kind of like, it's almost like a parasocial relationship with their representatives, which is good, because then it having that sort of relationship makes there feel like there's even more responsibility for them to represent us correctly. You know, it's not it's more than, hey, you have this job in DC and I hardly know about you. It's more like, hey, we're kind of friends in a weird way. Don't you want to make sure we're not like starving to death? Like, don't you want to make sure you pass good policy?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like I think the parasocial relationships might be something that's kind of been underused by the left. I mean, because the entirety of the online right-wing politics is all just building parasocial relationships with like internet father figures.
Yeah, you have like Ted Cruz and I think Dan Crenshaw that go on to like Crowder's like stuff, Louder with Crowder or whatever. Like they go on that show and then they get to like put out their personality a little bit, and it basically does the exact same thing but for right wingers. And I think that's helped kind of fuel their like continuation of having like younger, because if we look at Gen Z, for instance, Gen Z is like polarized, the furthest right, the furthest left, whatever. And I think that has played a big part in getting a lot of like younger people being right, because they don't care about the policy, they care about the memes, you know. And I think that's been able to influence them quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's been talked about it, but it's which politician would I want to go fucking grill and have a beer with? It's not about policies, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ted Cruz is not one. I prefer staying alive.
Dude, I want him out of office. He's my rep. Love it.
Beto almost got him. I think he probably made a few mistakes.
Beto was really close. I think Beto messed himself up, because whenever he ran for president, he went super hard on guns, and I'm like, yeah. Well, if you ever planned on having a future in Texas, that might be gone now.
Yeah, that's gone. He went too hard on one thing to try and win a presidency.
Yeah.
But my thoughts is there is the like populist wing of the Republican Party, and Crenshaw, Ted Cruz, and Donald Trump kind of deal, where there is the parasocial relationship, but it differs from like the older type of like more economic conservative deal, maybe like socially like moderate or slightly conservative, but not liberal. Of like, I was doing research for an article on my school's newspaper on like the local candidates, and the one running against the person that I'm working for or that I'm interning for, like his entire policy was making sure that they went to the state capitol less and less. Like, I think there was a bill to pass where they would do a budget for 2 years instead of just one. so that they could spend less time in Colombia.
Why? It's so.
It was just so that they'd spend less like taxpayer money being there. So that's it.
It's kind of strange how like on the right wing they're pushing this idea of like the left wants total anarchy and chaos, yet the right's the one that are trying to like step out of government and reduce its power more and more and more.
Wait, you have to love the So there's a big contradiction here. So the left simultaneously wants anarchy but wants big government, and conservatives want small government but a huge military and police force. So they're super like hypocritical when they levy critiques towards the left or even like what they say they stand for. It's
This gets into what we were going to talk about later with PragerU, but
we can honestly go ahead and transition. I don't think there's much to say about the AOC stuff.
Yeah, I just think before we switch, I think the AOC stuff is really good. If she continues streaming and keeps up those numbers, it could definitely be very beneficial to have a more progressive generation come up.
Yeah, and I think more progressives should do it too. I think like the more we get out there, like that, take like Congress people taking, or even people who are running campaigns taking like these mediums to influence people. Hopefully, we'll put a lot more like Gen Z people to the left.
Yeah, I think like the one thing that leftism has to focus on is being more friendly and being more like dumbing down ideas for people and like making it very simple and easy to understand. Because I think a lot of these concepts, like we were talking about before we started recording, need better explanations.
Well, we can't just go. Let's start at the commodity.
Yeah.
Like the basis book is like this big. Like that's what our like theory is based on.
It's right here.
I have it, and
I have Capital on my computer.
I haven't touched it. I put my bookmark where the book starts at page 120, because Ingalls was like, I'm gonna write 4 prefaces for every time it comes out before I die.
Yeah, I've read a good bit of it on the PDF, but the moment I bought the actual book, because I thought I'd read it more if I bought the actual book, I haven't touched it. Like, it's just after the first 3 chapters, I'm like, ugh.
That's why, like, Cam, I talked to you a bit about like I want to push you to do the leftology videos that are essentially just taking leftist terminology and just explaining it in very understandable ways to people.
It's like it'd be like the Gravel Institute, but we don't hire people that make other people really angry.
Speaking of the Gravel Institute, how do you guys feel about like their social media marketing, where it's very kind of like purposely unprofessional?
That's just the new age. That's like the new generation thing. I think it works in their benefit to have something unprofessional.
Yeah, like when they told PragerU to like shut the fuck up or something. Like I was like, oh my god.
Like that's how the right got so many like 14-year-olds. It was just acting like all tough. It's like, I don't care or anything. It's just, it's like acting as a cool guy. Like that works for children or for teenagers.
Yeah,
that's what they look up to. The cool guy that's just like, I don't care.
Yeah, more important than policy is being like cool and counterculture and being like fucking edgy. And I think right now, even though it's like years later, people still see the left as like big red yelling at you for saying words that they don't like, you know?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of like, that's what me and Cameron talked about on the last podcast, about like how we had to have some sort of room for some edginess, because that's just what attracts people. Like that sort of like counterculture, edgy sort of thing is how you get all like the young people.
Yeah, it's definitely better the way Gravel Institute does it, because they are punching up. It's not the way the right did it back in like 2015 and 2016.
Yeah.
To gain such a large basis was to punch down. Like that's where we've gotten to the point where we have, what can I say and not get demonetized eventually on YouTube? Let's go like to the point, like in extreme. This is like a year or 2 down the line of going down the pipeline, but like Holocaust denial, like that comes back to just being like making the Holocaust jokes and being like making Jewish.
Yeah, we got to be edgy, but the opposite way.
Like punch up, like make fun of the rich, like do what the comedy operas did in the classical era. But I think there's definitely a benefit for the Gravel Institute. But we we do have to hold them accountable. Definitely, we can't let them get by on any
like Mouthy's video where he came in and he was like a nuance bro, and he was like, actually, you should use this study instead to make that point.
Dude, I don't think pushing like deep nuance is going to be great for moving people over.
I thought it was
not for pushing for nuance, but more of pushing for like making sure that all of these statements are correct. To the there's it's just an impenetrable wall of facts.
Well, okay, so I think there's like different levels of like leftism. All right, so you got like you're like bringing people to the left, and I think Gravel Institute does that pretty well. And then there's those of us who are on the left already, and it's like, okay, well, let's make the entry point to the left as accurate as possible. And that's kind of like our job, is to like kind of criticize ourselves, you know, sharpen the knife that is leftism. So I think it's fine. I just thought it was really funny, and I called Mouthy a nuance bro for it, because it's just but yeah,
definitely it's going to be interesting to see what these things lead to, because the Gravel Institute has had fairly popular support so far, and
they're doing pretty well.
I think they've almost reached their third to last goal on Patreon. I haven't Patreon subbed to them. But,
dude, I think like another great entry point into leftism is like the insane amount of young people just making TikTok videos on concepts and shit.
Oh yeah, like Kellyanne Conway's daughter.
Dude, not even just her, but I think that like what I was saying to you about explaining leftist concepts is like taking those bite-sized, understandable TikToks, but packaging them in a not professional, but like putting them into YouTube videos that's a little more accessible to millennials than like TikTok, because like TikTok's very Gen Z.
Well, that's what I think Gravel Institute has actually done pretty well, is they're breaking down some like simple, like more complicated ideas, like trying to explain like how capitalism influences the government and whatnot, and being able to do it in like 5 minutes, like without having to give you like an essay to read or something, you know, or like a whole book.
Oh yeah, and I think we need more of that, definitely. I think the Gravel Institute is a great start, but I think we need more like just like single people that aren't making hour-long like cut from their stream videos.
Have y'all watched Zexazy by any chance? Zexazy has like
heard of him.
He has two kind of like PragerU-ish looking like videos, but it's on like, he has one called Abolish Private Property. Here's some other one, but it's basically Marx in minutes, and it's like a 10-minute video that explains a Marxist concept.
That's not an introductory level kind of deal.
No, you need you need concepts that make sense in the realm of capitalism. Like I think you need to bring people over to like the free market where everyone's co-ops first.
You need some like social democracy explaining, not
We're trying to get to like, we're trying to accept them like imperialism bad. We can't get on like the private property stuff.
Y'all don't want to abolish private property tomorrow? Come on, guys.
see, like what I kind of want to focus on is like more moving people over to pushing for more co-ops, more workplace democracy, showing that practical not change. All government programs are bad. Government programs can be fucking great. I mean, everyone loves Social Security now. Everyone wants to protect Social Security because it's a program that we do well, and we can do healthcare well. We could probably do housing well. We are a rich nation. And also, I think one of the other things I want to get people to think about is maximum profit the ultimate goal that we need to be working towards? Because I've seen a lot of people will say co-ops won't make as much money, but if they're working more ethically and all their workers are happier and have more wealth, is the maximum profit really that big of a deal?
Yeah, true. Like there has to be some sort of balance between like maximizing economic growth and happiness. And I think like economic growth is important, especially while we exist in capitalism. But yeah, we definitely need to be like, well, is it worth slowing down a little bit for like the sake of people's well-being, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's also like connecting to what people already like. I mean, people like child labor laws. People like 8-hour workdays. They like their weekends. I think people like minimum wages. I'm not actually sure.
They're not happy with the one we have currently.
Yeah. I don't think most people want to abolish the minimum wage, but I think like connecting with things people already like and explain and like just moving them the next step forward is much more impactful than being like, here's why we need to abolish private property.
This is why it's important to act as a so be a radical leftist communist, but at the same time function as a progressive liberal, be maybe like a social democrat, and convince people to that. Because the truth is, communism isn't happening for a really fucking long time. So you gotta start
and people care about what's in their lifetime.
And you gotta start putting the breadcrumbs out to get people walking that way, which is gonna be like social democracy.
So far, the video ideas we've had, I have a essay finished for a video, like the script for wage slavery, which I think that's a pretty basic concept. I thought of one yesterday. It was like a history of gentrification. That might be a series more than a singular video. Originally, we had... So there's 5 European countries that have no minimum wage, but they have an effective minimum wage from about 13 to 16 US dollars. And that's Switzerland, Iceland. I know Sweden has it, and Finland, and then Denmark, I want to say.
Yeah, if you're going to do something on wages, also bring up how productivity and our wages have like split. Like we're way more productive than what we were when the minimum wage was instituted, and wages haven't really moved throughout that time, but productivity has like skyrocketed.
Yeah, so there's the counter argument to that, which one of our former hosts has put and spread, but it was changing the metrics of the scale, because that graph is like median family income compared to productivity, and the way they used it changed from median to mean, which I'm taking my basic stats course to get through my like.
Wasn't it mean of like all wages, not even just like working class wages?
I believe it was the mean of all wages, which is not statistically good.
Yeah, that's not good statistics. No one's talking about how like the money's just disappearing as productivity goes up. It's all being funneled into a specific group of people.
There's also the ones that it was we're not getting poor. The reason the middle class is shrinking is not because we're getting poorer, it's because we're getting richer. But it puts like poverty at like 35,000 a year. It's
also, like, it didn't adjust for like inflation.
It might.
Did it?
I don't know.
I don't know. That was like a month ago, so I don't remember.
But I don't think 35,000 is a good indicator of if somebody's living a substantially okay life. I wouldn't consider 40,000 middle class. Maybe on the very, very low reaches of it.
At like lower middle class, if it was considered middle class.
Yeah, but I think in the connotation of middle class, we think of being able to achieve some sense of the American dream of like having a picket fence and a house with at least like 2 to 3 bedrooms. And I don't think 40,000 could sustain that. But
depends on where you live. That's another thing too. Is like living. The reason why some of these like metrics are hard to figure out is like depending on where you live too. Like $40,000 can either be absolutely nothing, or it can be a lot. Like if you live in like I don't know, New York City, $40,000 isn't that much. If you live in like some small town in Texas, it's
$40,000 is pretty decent around here, and that's why it's really hard to push for leftist ideas, because they hear $40,000 and go, "Brother, I'm fine off that," you know?
Yeah, it's really dependent on like where people live, which is like one of the challenges we have to face too. Is like cities are most often the more progressive ones, and the reason why is because the living cost is most expensive there. So when they say that they want to be paid more or they need to be paid more, it makes sense. But the people who don't live in those cities, it can look bizarre because the living cost is drastically different.
Definitely. So PragerU, you guys do any preparation for this beforehand?
No, I just enjoy dunking on PragerU though. So.
I had notes on a video and I left it back at college and I'm at home right now.
Oh no.
I watched a video on I'll see if I can remember the notes in my head. Let's see how much I can pull out.
Check your photographic memory.
But so it was the video on energy. Let me pull up the title for that from Google Chrome. Go in my old podcaster voice. You guys can talk. I don't want too much silence. I need people to listen to the end of this podcast.
You ever watch the metrics on your YouTube and see that people just like dip off? Like they watch like 10 minutes and they're gone.
You get 10 minutes?
Man,
yeah, on my last one.
I've done that with like the songs I've posted to YouTube. I don't like doing it because you can tell the section where you fucked up because it'll get to like the second verse and they're all fucking dropping right out of that.
Okay, so there's one I got through halfway. It was how to steal an election, mail-in ballots, which is probably extremely wrong. You should do a takedown of that one.
I don't even think the thing is with that is I don't even think a factual logical takedown would mean anything to someone that believes in that.
Is the video
PragerU is
gone?
mainly just entertainment to take down. I mean, when I take down PragerU, it's just for lefties because like if someone believes in PragerU, they're pretty far gone.
Oh no! What's wrong with wind and solar is what this video is called.
Dude,
the wind kills birds.
No, not that. Okay, let me try and remember the points that I wrote down. So they talk about the ecological problems that come with wind and solar, which would be the amount that we would have to build wind and solar to replace oil completely, which they never use the word oil. They strategically use the word hydrocarbons, which is probably correct. I'm not going to doubt that it's a not correct term, but it's a little,
they're trying to sound big brain.
They're trying to avoid saying oil because there's a bad connotation with like oil and drilling and fracking in a sense.
Yeah.
So to create all the physical capital of energy, whatever it takes to make energy, and wind, solar takes up a lot of land right now. Like it's not the most efficient form of energy out there, and it takes up a large amount of land to get to the amount of solar energy you need to be able to get a full city. Like there might be good places like Nevada where the sun's just going to kill you.
I did that response to like the religion of green by PragerU or whatever, and they talked about how much space solar would take. But the way they worded it is as if we were going to take like level Houston and replace it with like solar panels. Because she was like, it'll take the whole size of Houston. We'll have to get rid of cities to like implement these. And I'm like, hey,
you know, put it on top of cities.
Well, you could do that. And also in Texas, do you know how much like land we have that you could like just put solar panels on? Like Texas is full of just like land. Like you could just chop down a forest and put some solar panels out, or take a farm.
Not great either.
Well, okay. The thing is, if we have to like replace this energy, you're gonna have to do some things, you have to think about the cost benefit. And I'm not saying like literally tear down all the forests in Texas, but like if there's like a plot of land that you could put solar panels on.
Desert there to just be like, okay.
Well, yeah, and then there's just land like desert. There's all these places that you could put it that don't mean that you have to level a city, which is how she was like using her rhetoric, like as if we were gonna have to level Houston in order to implement solar, which is ridiculous.
Okay. This gets a little off topic, but I think I remember somebody talked about we go to the moon and we put on its like what would that be? Perpendicular to its axis. So we put a ring of solar panels so that at least half of them are always being charged. And we just beam the energy down to Earth.
Okay.
I think with energy in particular is like one thing people have to realize with like Joe Biden talking about like phasing out of fracking is that regardless of whether it's bad for the environment, we're going to run out of oil. It's going to happen. We have to replace it with something. We can't just keep relying on it forever.
We should do some nuclear. Yeah. Okay, leftist for nuclear. That's something we need to.
They never mention nuclear at all. Like the entire comment section is just nuclear ?
Nuclear has been treated a lot like socialism, where socialism has had like this red scare because bad things have happened. Because nuclear had some bad events, people still think it's that bad. But our technology has advanced like way past that. And don't get me wrong, there's still some like things that we'd want to make sure were like super secure, but like we could do it way better than we ever like did before. But there's still this same like fear from then. And I don't know, I just think it's really interesting that it parallels just like socialism is like feared because of like old like societies that couldn't do it, but now it'd be even like easier to do it. Like it's same
Yeah,
thing,
I think
basically.
it's like you have to, like what we were talking about with like appealing to masses with videos, is making stuff to counter the common talking points. Like you say socialism, they go, oh, it's never failed, look at, or it's always failed, look at Venezuela. Same with like nuclear energy. It's like, oh, you want Chernobyl to happen in the US or something like that. And I think we've got to start replying to like those basic talking points.
Yeah,
The
for
entire
sure.
comment section here is clowning on it. Like the second comment's Lamau never thought I would hear a video about batteries are bad. We need to burn more oil. Because at the end of the video, they say that the ways of getting hydrocarbon, which is oil, has become much safer. So by saying hydrocarbon, it's kind of strategic as they get to avoid saying oil, because we associate the entirety of climate change with oil, because it's honestly correct. Oil and coal are the main causes of climate change.
Yeah,
What about all the
whenever
leftists that don't want to move away from oil because it causes a ton of pollution to create the new energy sources?
Well, nuclear would be probably the best, but there is that long term, like the waste kind of deal.
Yeah, well,
And
I think
then
that's why like I'd really primarily use nuclear as like a transition until we could get to more efficient wind and solar, whatever, that could easily replace everything.
There's another comment here. Take this with a grain of salt, but this commenter said, student of material engineering here, to stipulation, I would like to add solar panels in lab have broken through the 33% barrier. That maximum was made under the assumption that a solar panel only absorbs one wavelength of light. Well, it's a bit more complicated, but whatever. With those in a lab, they can essentially stack different types of materials together and make a highly efficient panel. The theoretical maximum in that case is around 90% efficiency. It would cost a pretty penny for that, though. Although this is a grid scale, batteries have been shown to be highly effective in small scales. Look at the example of Australia's grid. It was having issues regulating its power throughput. Tesla put in a battery pack, and now it runs quite smoothly. With a base of power plants, solar power, wind, and batteries could prove to be quite useful indeed. If all it's doing is regulating power, you need much less energy storage. So it's saying that their claim that solar being only 33% efficient is completely wrong already.
Yeah, I think like the main thing is just solar is pretty like he said, it's a pretty penny like to get really efficient solar. It's just kind of expensive currently, which will eventually over time go down, because that's what happens with technology. Everything like when it first comes out, it's like super expensive, and then as we learn like how to produce it cheaper and faster, it ends up the price ends up like going down.
Yeah, I think people are still stuck in like 10 years ago when solar panels weren't as effective as they are now. And so people, the first time they hear about solar, it's like, oh, it's this great new thing, but the panels aren't that effective. They don't absorb that much energy. And they still just haven't heard anything new, and they still think that.
Yeah, because not many people like keep up with like how's solar energy doing. They
Yeah.
hear it once and they're like, okay, so we're not gonna do that, and they forget that was like 30 years ago or something.
Okay, so the main thing I wanted to talk about for PragerU was the schools. That this is old news. It's already been like a week at the point that we're recording this, and it'll be over like a week and a half by the time I release this podcast. So, what are you guys' thoughts on how PragerU is being used at school as like factual information?
I think it's literal propaganda being put into schools. Like half their stuff is just false. I think it's crazy, especially within school. We want to promote people to further their education, and they literally have videos telling kids not to do that. I don't know. I think it's overall harmful. I understand that like some people are scared of socialism, so they want something that'll stop their kids from becoming dirty little commies later in their future. But this is just literally like half their stuff isn't correct, and I mean, it's literal just propaganda being put in schools. Like, I don't think there's any other way to put it, because the thing is, it's wrong. It puts out some sort of narrative, usually, like it's a right-wing narrative that is like actively harmful, and it's literal, just like trying to get a hold of kids while they're like being able to be influenced really easily, and it's just propaganda being put on children.
Yeah, I think the problem isn't even that it's just like right-wing propaganda, is that it's literally just propaganda. It's mostly false. It should not be being shown to our children. It really shouldn't exist at all. And, I think I've talked to Cam about this before, but I honestly think we need some sort of laws against blatantly, knowingly spreading misinformation, similar to our defamation laws.
Yeah, I think the consequences too of PragerU being in schools, if it lasts too long, will be very detrimental if we can't like educate these kids after they get out of public school. Because like we were just talking about energy, right? I mean, and we just pointed out how they directly lied about how efficient solar is, and acting as if like oil is actually a better one.
They never provide a single source in their videos.
Actually, they do provide sources. You have to jump through a bunch of hoops to get them, and then half their sources end up being them.
Wait, what? They source themselves?
Did you watch Vosh's video on this? He clicked on like one of their source links in their description. It's not on all their videos, but some of their newer videos have source links that take you to their website. So and you have to do like a few clicks to get to it.
The source link of oh, they have a new video. Capitalism or socialism, which is more democratic?
Oh, bet I will respond to that later. Oh, that'll be fun. I love talking about socialism versus capitalism. It's my favorite thing. Like anytime I see a moment to like pounce on that, I do, because none of these people know what socialism is. It's hilarious.
Okay, so
see, I think like even if you genuinely just like capitalism more, I don't hate that as long as you understand socialism.
Well, like, okay, look, yeah, if you want to be a capitalist, just know what capitalism is. Like, if you're okay with the problems of it, like, just admit that you're okay with the problems of it. If you do that, I don't care. I don't know what your moral system is. Just like understand what you're talking about, and then sure, you can prefer it. I don't care.
I think what pisses me off the most is when people are like, "Yeah, capitalism has a lot of flaws, but it's like the best system we have right now." But we'll know nothing about any other economic system.
And the worst part about that is it's half true. Like currently, like we're not gonna get socialism, so yeah, I mean capitalism is the best thing, but it's like kind of the only thing. And like shouldn't we be looking inward and critiquing the system we live in, and seeing what we want to fix and get to, which would be some form of socialism, right?
It's also that people will recognize that capitalism has successes and failures, but when you look at any country that's tried socialism, all they see there is the failures. Like no one looks at how Bolivia like halved their fucking poverty rates, quadrupled their GDP. It's just, oh, they're still poor, so socialism bad.
Well, what I always bring up to people is when capitalism was first coming into being, it failed as well. Like I mean, there was like places that tried to do capitalism and it didn't work. Like so, like this idea that like socialism can't work because it hasn't is kind of dumb. It's like it just hasn't yet. It's not either capitalism hasn't gotten to the level to let socialism come into existence and continue existing, or we just haven't figured out how to do socialism correctly yet.
Also, arguably, capitalism is failing now in America, depending on what your measure of success is.
Yeah. There's a lot of metrics that we could like point at and say like, and to an extent, capitalism is failing. But the problem with doing that is also like we can look at things that say that it's doing well. The thing is, capitalism just exists. There's problems in it. I wouldn't call it a success or a fail. It's just what is, and we should like look at the problems but want to fix those instead of like saying that we can't do anything else. I think that's kind of like
so I'm going to the sources. So their first source, which is basically their claim that we cannot produce enough energy from wind and solar to meet the needs of the world, is from the Manhattan Institute, which happens to be a conservative 501 nonprofit American think tank.
Of course.
Institute for Policy. Wow. Just basically sourcing yourself.
Propaganda machine sources version. Propaganda machine.
Yeah. Okay. So they're 20%. They're like percentage points for like how efficient they are. I can't really tell how, like, it's a long article of like a science finding from like Italy and stuff like that. One's from 2017, one's from 2009, and then the other one's also from 2017. Okay, these two are together.
Yeah, I think
But
this is like heavily like problematic. So like the fact is this is getting fed to children, and like say they want to like say you got a super smart kid, right? And he's like, well, you know what? I'm gonna fact check this. Let me go to their sources. Well, I highly doubt they're gonna realize that they're basically sourcing themselves. Like maybe, but like
not
there's
all of
no
them.
there's like no way to like do that because what I know when I was in school, for instance, if I saw someone source something, I would take the source as an authority. So what they're gonna do is to look at the source. They'll go, oh well, I guess this is true. But in reality, what's happening is you just have a bunch of like think tanks basically sourcing each other
Yeah.
based upon like false information. One person starts it, and it's a bunch of sourcing. The point that you can't find the original point that was like wrong.
It's just a circle of misinformation.
Yeah,
that just
basically
repeats itself over and over again.
reinforces itself constantly. Yeah.
And you also like, I don't think I learned anything about verifying sources until college, because back in high school, it was you had to use websites that had like .gov at the end and shit like that, or like no .coms, no Wikipedias and shit like that. And then once you get to college, it's finally, oh, here's how you verify a source, and your fucking professor will go behind you and make sure your sources are good.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of those sources for their videos would never fly in academic settings.
Yeah,
and I think
this is
the biggest
super
problem.
troubling because this is just promoting just false information. I mean, and kids are gonna like take whatever they're being taught in school as an authority for the most part. I mean, unless they're like watching this, for instance, outside of school. But for the most part, most of them are gonna
Let's
go to
hope
class.
not.
Most of them are gonna go to class and they're gonna believe what they get taught, which is worrisome, especially for like the problems, the existential threats that we're about to have that we need to act fast on. This is only going to delay fixing a lot of those problems.
I mean, yeah,
Okay,
it's like
so-
everyone's full education on communism is the USSR was communist, the USSR was bad. And that's people's
Therefore, communism's
entire
bad.
understanding.
Yeah. And now they're all going to think that we can't ever do renewable energy because it sucks, I guess.
Because at one point solar panels were bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just delaying.
I think we truly are like one of the most regressive countries because of this.
Yeah, it's just we have people who are actively going against progress. Like they're like more so than, I mean, other places have it too, but here it just seems like it almost feels like people want to go against progress, which like is disturbing. I guess it's profitable.
I don't even know if it's that. I think it's like, I don't know, maybe it's like the fear of change. I don't know. Like we talked about with these concepts going over a lot of people's heads, and like even the labor vouchers thing goes over in my head after watching videos about it. So I don't blame them, but I think it's that they don't understand it, and it's very hard to understand.
I think it comes from people just not wanting to be involved, actually. So they'll take whatever route allows them to not be involved. Think about it. If solar panels don't work, then you don't have to fight to get solar panels instituted. You can just go, well, what's working is the best we got, so I don't got to do anything.
It is the easy answer thing.
That's what I would think, because we're super apolitical. I mean, we even look at like voter turnout, and it's super low. People just don't care to be like
Younger voter
political.
turnout's blowing up though.
Yeah,
Like,
well, this
this
I don't know if
year.
I don't know if the younger voter turnout is really going to carry on, or if it's just Orange Man bad voter turnout.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. That'll be
Orange Man is
interesting.
bad, so
He is bad. I made a video and I was like, I used to be like, you can't say Orange Man's bad. You got to say like why he's bad. But in that video, I was like, nah. At this point, if you don't know Orange Man bad, like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you all the reasons.
At this point, like there's no more value in arguing over whether like Donald Trump's racist, whether he's sexist. It's like you have
Whether
your
his
opinion,
policies
and
are
nothing's going to
harmful.
change it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no doubting it. There's transcripts from his first divorce that he pretty much raped his first wife, like after getting a bad plastic surgery.
well,
That's
even
in the
beyond
divorce file.
the personal life stuff. I mean, his policies have just been like bad for the country. So like,
Well, even like his biggest accomplishments aren't really great.
well, like so like there was small job growth under Trump for a while, and those were that job growth was actually from policies Obama had passed under his administration, and then now job growth is like plummeting because of the virus, and Donald Trump hasn't been able to do anything to really
See,
stimulate the economy to help
it's
people.
with the
because we
GDP stuff, it's like I don't think when you're going for like someone in the middle leaning right, I don't think there's any value in saying it was a Obama thing, because they're just gonna be like, whatever, fake news. But point to the fact that like his percentage GDP growth is mediocre. Like Clinton or Bill Clinton had higher GDP growth, and Reagan, their next favorite president, had way higher GDP growth. It's just not that significant.
Well, then we can also point at the fact that we almost went to war under this president because he decided to bomb some official of a government without like at all like planning this out. He was just like, "We'll get him," and then we
No,
almost.
I don't even think that works with people. People go like,
Well,
"Man, that was the evil terrorist going against America, brother."
yeah, but like I mean, like I don't think most people
because
want
they
war either,
justified it
though.
afterwards.
I mean, because like I don't even think people realize how bad destabilizing the Middle East
The thing is,
has
even
affected them.
the thing is, even if these people go like, "Oh, well, this is that," I mean, you can still push them on it. If I point out why like a certain policy Trump did was bad, and they go like, "Well, actually, that's like not the case," then I can go, "Well, how is it not the case?" And then eventually they don't have an argument anymore. The thing is, we can't like just say one thing and then be nice if they don't like take it. You have to like really push them and go like, "Hey, could you use that brain for a moment and think?" But if they don't want to do that, then they're a lost cause anyway, and they're gonna vote for Trump. So like,
Yeah, a big problem in America is that we think of jobs as a quantitative statistic instead of a qualitative thing. Like you can add as many jobs as you want, but if it means that people go from having one good job to having two mediocre jobs, that's not a good thing. Nothing's really changed except you had to work double the hours.
That's something I've been trying to explain to people, but as Isocratic said earlier, it's the thing of it's easier just to say it's easier just to say job growth good instead of going, oh, it's not good jobs, so we need to really be fighting for good jobs and doing
yeah, I
work
mean,
for
I
it.
think you can pivot into that, but it's always a good way to start by saying like, "Oh, the
Yeah.
job growth's this," and then you can go, and the little bit of job growth we did have actually led to people having worse jobs. There was just more bad jobs. Like you can kind of
Yeah.
like get into all of that stuff.
Especially when you have like a high growth in the stock market without real effects on the people. You have this like economy that's built, or the big overarching economy is built on these unstable foundations, and it makes when it eventually collapses much worse, like
Yeah.
when we had it collapse in America here in, what is it now, 7 months ago, because a lot of European countries had those safety nets in order to make sure that their people didn't just fall into abject poverty. And we don't, because for some reason we've been tricked into believing that having safety nets is a bad idea.
Yep, and that's
It's the individualism.
that circles back around to the problem of PragerU
It's
being in
not.
schools too.
I agree with what was it? I think it's Matt Christman's take on individual. We're not an individualist country. A lot of our choices are based on like what's in season. We don't like have our own style. It's based on like what we consume.
Well, okay, I don't think there's
culture.
actual individualism at the level that most people talk about it, but I think the mentality, which I think is what Patrick was getting at,
I mean
is
like
highly...
the
It's
economic
selfishness.
individualism. It's the economic individualism is what I mean.
Well, people in America, like I mean, that's something that we raise like so high, is this idea of being like, I don't know, we don't think of like economics in a collective sense. We only think about
self-sufficiency.
Yeah, and I think that's super problematic because when we put resources together, they're way more effective. I mean, we can look at like even healthcare. When we have like everyone paying into healthcare ends up being cheaper because we can get better deals doing that than like if you had to pay for your healthcare yourself like directly. And this goes on like tons of like things. So I think like a collective mindset when it comes to economics and basically everything would be super helpful. But in America, there's this promotion of like the individual like so hardly that like it causes people to stand against these things that would help their own individual freedom if they were for them. Because this dichotomy of individual and collective is just bullshit. Because the truth is, if you have a good collective, like if you have people working well collectively, you're going to increase the individual freedom, not the other way around.
What was it? Ben Shapiro had an argument against unions a few years ago, saying that it got rid of the right to ask for your own raise. which
Oh
An
yeah,
egg for your own ways.
like he tried to say like if you like work together, you're less likely to get a raise or something. Like you can't like
no,
get
like
your own.
he thought of it, if I can remember correctly, of like it becomes a collective bargaining. Everybody gets a raise instead of just you go into your boss's office and ask for a raise. You go and
I hate
instead you
that.
go out in general
I
strike.
think the other thing with like individualism is whenever people actually have to deal with serious adversity and make it through, they go, "Oh, I dealt with it and I made it through. So why should we try to make it easier for more people to make it through if I made it
Have you
through?"
seen the trolley problem where like the train has already ran over people and it's like you can pull the lever and it won't run over
Yeah.
anyone else? And it's like people don't want to pull that lever. They're like, "Oh, free college? Well, I had to pay for my college, so no one should have to get free college." "Oh, well, I worked for that wage, so no one needs a higher wage." It's like
I think that's the most obnoxious like mentality.
it's
almost.
annoying. Yeah, it's like I'm sorry, but like society wasn't there yet. But
It's
we
like-
can do that now, so we should do that now. Always tell people to think about their kids. That's what I do. If someone has kids, I'm like, "Hey man,
Yes, that's what
Think
I've been
about your
trying to link
kids.
it back to is when I was younger, I remember like a big thing from my parents was like that they got from their parents was you want to make your life better for your kids than it was for you. And I think that is diminished in the past 10 years. The idea of making life better for your future kids is gone. I think we are all worried about ourselves and what is going to happen within our lifetime. And goes back to even the energy thing and like transitioning. No one cares about 100-year transitions. They want to know what's going to happen now for them.
Yeah, and that definitely affects a lot. We no longer think of things in the long term, which allow us to do like really good things. Like I mean we can even talk about we were talking about energy earlier, transitioning our energy and all these things. They don't care about long term things. They're thinking about their lifetime, which is it's super hurtful to progress.
Yeah, and I'm gonna circle back around to the newest Gravel Institute video, which is calling the Civil War a leftist revolution, which I hadn't thought of beforehand, but I think I agree, honestly, with
I haven't
that.
seen that video yet.
It's a pretty good one. I think it's their least disputable out of the three for me personally.
That's a good way to put that.
What I asked about earlier with the Gravel Institute's social media managing hurting them is like the Gravel Institute, if they weren't doing that, could push into being in schools the same way PragerU is.
I mean, I don't really want that in schools, honestly. Like, I don't want like such propaganda to be in schools either way.
Yeah.
I think the point is to combat PragerU to destroy its influence. But what I was talking about is talking about historically with workers' movements before pre-Civil War, and I believe wage slavery comes from that. I don't know if that's directly a Marxist term. It's more of an American labor movement term, if I have my history correct. And the reason a lot of them were against slavery is not for like, it might have been a moral reason, but there's also the backing of, there is the contradiction of capitalism is that capitalists always want to lower wages because it means that they can make more profit. But in doing so, they also destroy their consumer base. But in the seeking of lowering wages, what is the cheapest wage but a slave? That was what they used as an argument to get support against slavery being expanded and eventually for it existing at all within the United States. Because to protect the northern workers, you had to make sure that the people that were above them couldn't hire slaves, because people in the north were not willing to become slaves because they had already had some sense of actually being paid. I wouldn't want my wage to just be removed. So
yeah, definitely not.
They didn't want to have to compete against people who were practically machines, honestly, because you paid for them once and they did work without having a wage.
Yeah, they were literally means of production.
It was by force. They are. So I think we ignore that as leftists a lot, that strategy. We need to bring a lot of the big issues to home, because in the North there wasn't slavery, but there was the possibility that that having slavery as an institution could mean that your wage could be justified being lowered. And if you look at because there's people that you're competing against that don't have wages at all.
Yeah, and it's the personalizing these policies to people. Like I think one of the ways I got one of my friends to move over on co-ops is think of all the things that upset you about your workplace and how you have a say in that if you own part of your workplace. Even unionizing is a step up from the current system now. And like he didn't even know what unions were. And he was like, wait, we could all collectively bargain as workers to get higher wages.
You know, if there's
South
anything,
Carolina has the lowest of all states.
if there's
I think it's
anything that
2.1.
we need to throw into schools that isn't PragerU, it's probably something teaching workers' rights, since most people are going to go out of school and be workers of some kind, you know.
See, I think like also in a very like, and this is kind of what I've been pushing throughout this whole thing is like, we need to connect leftism more personally with people. And I think we need to arm people with very simple, understandable talking points that shut arguments down really quickly.
Yeah, because that's what the right has been able to do really effectively. They have like really simple to grasp talking points. Like for instance, if I explain why people's wages have been lowered, it's a little bit more complicated than like or at least been stagnant or whatever, even though production has gone up or whatever. It's gonna be a little bit more difficult for me to explain that because I'm gonna go through like some history, yada yada. But like what conservatives get to do is they get to go, hey, you know those brown people that are crossing that border? That's why your wages isn't moving. And like so they have like really simple, easy talking points, which allows like that when people are looking for simple answers, conservatives are there to give the simple answer. So we need to find a way to build to do the exact same thing, which I think we've struggled with since like
I think
forever.
it is maybe like more honestly, is there an honest way to remove nuance from leftism?
I don't know. I mean, that's something we have to figure out. Is we have to think about ways to find out how to explain these things in little bite-sized bits. Where instead of saying, I mean, I guess you could basically say like, "Hey, the corporations are who are taking your money."
Yeah,
it'd be kind of similar.
I think a lot of times we take up positions that we would use when we're talking leftist to leftist, and then we take those positions and argue for them leftist to conservative, which is not
No, and you're just in a completely different world. And I think there's some great ways to connect it. Like you wouldn't want to live in an authoritarian government, so why do you want your boss to have an authoritarian rule over your workplace? And I think that would connect a lot more with people than like a nuanced discussion on wage theft.
Yeah, be like, aren't you a fan of democracy? I mean, you love democracy in your government. Why wouldn't you want that in the place that you spend your other 8 hours of your life, like in your workplace? I think like that's kind of like Richard Wolff's kind of thing, and I think Richard Wolff is really effective at selling worker cooperatives or whatever. I think he's done a really good job at that because he walks people through it, and then he goes, "Hey, you like some sort of socialism?" And I don't know. I think it's really clever.
Yeah, and that's also what I was saying earlier with like, public schools are socialism to an extent. Same with like public roads to an extent are socialism. You like these things.
It's not, but it's a good.
But I'm saying they're kind of socialized, and it's a great way to push. It's a kickoff point, I guess.
Yeah, like as much as like there's some things that are like when you get into like actually what socialism is, it's wrong. It is super rhetorically effective to go like the fire department's a socialist institution, which I mean obviously socialism is like a total different thing, but it functions in a way to get people to kind of.
Do you think like leftists in general feel like they're too righteous and honest to use those kind of cheap talking points?
I think it's the whole purity thing in the left where it's like you have to be 100% correct.
This is liberals in general. We're so fucking like we want purity so much, and it's like the right wing are fucking vicious dogs that'll fucking rip you apart, dude. There is no value in trying to just be like, I don't know, simps to nuance to when you're talking about people that don't give a fuck about nuance.
Yeah, the thing is with the right, they're not worried about lying to get what they want. While on the left, it's like, oh, we want to be honest to people, which is true. We should be, but like we have to figure out how to be more effective. And I think if that means like not like explaining fully what socialism is in order to use socialism to Like kind of in the way Bernie Sanders used socialism, where he called himself a socialist, but in reality he's like a social democrat. Like, I think that's fine. If we had to paint socialism as that for a bit to start getting people to move left and be more normalized with the word
And
socialist.
when that happens,
sure.
we need to make sure people are not infighting against those people.
Leftist unity is a spook.
Yeah.
I don't believe in leftist unity.
It's definitely different because the right, and especially the far right, they're not for something as much as they are against something, in a sense. And we're
against something.
We're against something, but we're also for something is what overtakes that. Like we're against like a bourgeois class, but we're trying to get something.
Yeah, so
their main argument is against something.
It's a lot harder to explain what we want to do than saying what we shouldn't do, which is all conservatives have to do. They have to go, well, capitalism's working. Like, what? Socialism's never worked. That's why, like, the socialism versus capitalism argument, when it comes to just talking points, unless you can sit down and actually explain socialism, is a hard argument to win, because all they have to go is look at all the countries that have failed. Capitalism's still doing fine. So we shouldn't do socialism.
Then, like, connect it back to their personal life. Is like, are you doing that great personally? You work at McDonald's making like $40K a year or whatever.
40K a year.
I always wish I was making 40K a year.
I honestly don't know what the fuck like wages equal up to, like, for yearly
take in econ in high school they teach you take your wage times it by 2,000. That's what you make it full time. Okay. So 725, which is the most.
Oh, that's like 14K.
Yeah, $14,500. But that's full time. People at McDonald's aren't usually working that much.
Yeah, man, I think it's like and again, like in a very general sense, like connecting it with people's personal lives and how they're functioning now instead of trying to explain very nuanced concepts. And if we're a bit misleading at first, but as they fall down the leftist pipeline, we explain it more, I don't think that's such a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to. I think this is what Richard Wolff does really well. Richard Wolff was one of the first people I watched about socialism, and when I talk about socialism, the terms I would use are going to be different than what Richard Wolff's talking about. He believes in market socialism, which when we really look at what socialism is as a full like mode of production, these are two separate things. But I don't think there's a problem with calling that socialism because it gets people in the door and they can lead them to where I am eventually over time as they get more interested. And if they do, and who cares if they don't? If they have to think that's socialism, they just want to push for that, I'm fine with that because that's progress. You know, we can worry about that later once we get there about trying to show them what.
See, I'd rather have more market socialists than conservatives.
I guess where I am would be like the market socialist idea where we have companies run as co-ops and we have robust social safety nets for people. I think that is what I would like.
I don't know if that's completely market socialism. It's more of just a...
Well, market socialism is basically just workers' ownership of the means of production within co-ops, but it's still capitalism because of the fact that there's markets and whatnot. But that's why it's market socialism. It's like half socialism. It's like you have one aspect of socialism, and I think that is fine. We are literally in neoliberalism, having to fight off like regressing. If a bunch of people have to be market socialists, I'm not gonna purity test them, tell them about how they're wrong. Now, if they want to come talk to me about like theoretical things about socialism and I'm a fucking nerd, of course I'm like, hey, actually no. But if we're talking about actual political effectiveness, I mean, I don't care. Be a market socialist, please. Fight for market socialism because we need to be going that direction.
Yeah, we're currently stuck in neoliberalism, which can't go like 10 years without either collapsing or going into fascism.
And I think like market socialism is more understandable than a fully automated communist society.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of crazy that like we spend, and I'm guilty of this too, but spend this time debating on like what communism actually is. Whenever that's like, hey man, you're never gonna live in that. You're like that's 200 years away probably, maybe even more. You're not gonna live in communism. Why are you debating this? You should be like trying to convince people to take the next step towards progress, which is going to be either social democracy or some sort of like market socialism, not like this this fully like done communism, stateless, classless society, you know.
Gay rights aren't guaranteed yet. We can't guarantee like
we have a president who wants to roll back gay adoption and things like that, attacking trans people.
Didn't he already roll back gay adoption? I think that already happened.
I don't know if I don't think he did, but he was like trying to. They brought it to the Supreme Court or something, which was just absolutely insane. And the fact that we have to worry about this, we have to worry about even keeping social security and keeping our healthcare system, I think it's like ridiculous that we have these purity fights over what actually is socialism when we're talking to like especially new leftists. Like the thing is, okay, if I'm a old leftist and I'm talking to another old leftist and we want to talk about like what socialism is in actuality, that's fine, you know. But if we're talking about trying to get people to the left, it's not helpful to like someone who just joined the left be like, actually you're wrong about everything, so shut the fuck up. Like that's gonna push someone away. It's not gonna
Yeah, and
keep
that's
them
why
coming.
like what I personally want to do as someone that's a new leftist is try to help. Like I'd love to talk to people that are further into the left that are making videos about how we can make concepts more explainable. And I'd like to be more like involved with that. I personally don't think I'm smart enough to do that all by myself.
Yeah, I have some things I actually want to do that have to do with that. The one I've done is I did socialism, and I did like socialism in the Marxist sense, not just like market socialism. And I explained like what that was, and I try to break it down as simple as possible. I gave like 3 criteria because I think the main reason why I think it's important for people to know that isn't because they need to be like getting us there currently. Like I think we have some things that we have to do before we can get there, but it's more to argue against conservatives who say, well, this country was socialist and failed. You go, well, actually it's not, because it didn't fit this, which is actual socialism. And I think we need to do more of that. We also need to be
I don't know
more
if that's super effective.
I think
Explaining,
more
like-
focusing on a like large imperial project to destroy any socialist that pops up kind of deal would be a much more effective way of doing it.
I don't know how good like 3 20-minute videos on how China isn't technically communist.
No. What I mean is like making. So what I did is I made one video. It's like 15 minutes, and it explains what socialism is, the criteria. So the thing is, if you ever are talking about moving to a socialist society, and you have a conservative come up to you and he's like, "Oh, well, socialism has never worked," you can go, "Well, did that society have this, this, this?" And if they
Is
go,
that your video with
no.
the main 3 tenets?
Yeah, it's like 3 points of like socialism, and the whole point of that was to make an easy way to debunk the arguments of like conservatives who say socialism's failed. It's like, well, no, socialism hasn't existed, and then they go like, we all always say that. It's like, well, did this fit these criteria? And if they go no, then like they can't talk anymore, because you're like, well, that's socialism. Sorry, because I think there's just too much argument of like what socialism is, and I don't think like we have to purity test market socialist and go, you're not actually socialist. But I think like at the same time, it's helpful to know like some concepts really simplified in order to combat right-wing talking points.
See, I think there's definitely value in people understanding what real socialism is and whether we've reached it or not. I don't know if it's that good of a talking point to go, well, they weren't real socialism, so that's not real socialism, you know? Because I don't think that registers with the average person.
Well, I think it helps quite a bit, because whenever I talk to people who think socialism is China, which is heavily oppressive, I want to tell them that it's not socialism, because no one's going to want to have China. No one's going to fight for that, right? I have to be able to explain why that isn't socialism, because if I can't, that's what they're going to think socialism is. And this is sort of like part of normalizing socialism, because I think that is like a step we have to take. We have to take this idea that
I see what you're saying.
socialism isn't this big villain, and the only way to do that is by explaining how countries like China, for instance, aren't socialist. And I don't mean like you need to know these things in order to fight other lefties on what socialism actually is, like fighting between me, a Marxist, versus a market socialist or something. I think that's kind of pointless. But I think like in order to kind of get rid of the because I mean, you could do this with market socialism too, I guess. Like if you wanted to explain market socialism, you could explain how China isn't market socialist, or you could explain how China isn't Marxist socialism. And you can basically explain why China is like a state capitalist society that's super oppressive. Which, if we can distance ourselves from these countries, I think socialism has a better chance of actually happening within the U.S. Because I think what people are afraid of is some sort of super authoritarian state or whatever.
Do you think there's any like solid representation of not socialism succeeding, because there's never been real socialism, but like movements towards that being positive? Because the way I see it, Bolivia, there's some good talking points when you talk about Bolivia. When you talk about like Venezuela up until the oil market crashed, there's some good stuff there. And then next one I want to learn about is Burkina Faso, I think is the next one.
I think with a lot of these countries, what we can say, which is what I often say, is I reflect this towards capitalism and how capitalism failed before it achieved, right? And I go, well, these were all socialist experiments, other than China. Fuck China. Okay, I don't like China. But all these ones that like did bad, I'll be like, well, these were socialist experiments. We didn't know exactly what we were like doing, yada yada. But we can look at what good things did happen, and then you can like point at like literacy rates going up, wages going up, whatever. And we can go like, so we know that good things can happen under this. We just have to figure out how to do it in a way that's sustainable, and all those things. But then you can also just go like with the bad things. You're like, well, they didn't achieve the full thing.
What if
so
I think Bolivia is a good way to, or Bolivia might be a new wave of things. It might be the second stage, maybe might be a good way to put it. Kind of learning from what came out of 20th century socialism and learning from it and changing from it.
yeah,
Because from what I know, Mas doesn't really operate as like a single party state kind of deal. It's more of a representative party of the working class rather than just trying to overtake the whole thing. And under it, they have seen massive growth, as I think we already said in the podcast.
Yeah.
And so they did get cooed last year. It's practically undeniable to say that they didn't, or to say that they got cooed. And I mean, there are people that are saying like it's not a coup because
unless you're Destiny.
See, even like popular, like the middle ground people aren't even saying it was a coup. Like I believe the only thing I knew about Bolivia before getting into leftism recently was that there were talks about how there was an unfair election by Morales, and I learned about that only through like Philip DeFranco.
And that was released by OAS, which is the Organization for American States, I believe. And then the New York Times reported like 6 months later that report had major flaws. So it was pretty much a U.S. backed coup from a factual standpoint. And I think what I've talked about it with people on a Discord, which is a little cringy to talk about Discord to other people, but
Yeah.
But I think we've learned that education is the most important part. Like even if you have the ability to, even if you have the monopoly of violence, I don't know what you term. I'm using a John Locke term for that or Hobbes term. But like even if you have the ability to create a force to overthrow the government, it's not a stable way to do it. Education is what is important, because in Bolivia, the people that are in the working class, the lower middle class, they have seen the horrors of neoliberalism within their country twice now within the last 20 years. From originally in the early 2000s to where they had to take out IMF loans basically just to pay public servants. It wasn't even for infrastructure projects. And I believe they had a guest on Chapo this week where he talked about how the interim government had taken out another IMF loan illegitimately because they never won an election to fund something. So now this new mass government, if they come to power, which I hope they do, has a load of debt to take over from, an evil institution, which I think I'm not a big fan of the IMF. And if you know about it, I don't suspect either of you to be either. But to see that these people had seen what the other parties had done to them, and it was, I believe it was the leader that was leader from 2003 to 2005, maybe. He was vice president before that. He was not a popular candidate, but he was the least hated candidate really for the more like neoliberal right-wing side. And they still got crushed by it was like 20 to 30 points in between Mas and the next party. So education is really important to see. So even after a socialist state has or a socialist party has taken control, to understand of what the past neglects and past abuses of neoliberalism and capitalism had been on that country.
I think to link talk about education. Education's super important, and I think that kind of links back to why PragerU being in schools is problematic, because they're not really going to give an unbiased account to any of these things, and if anything, going to do the opposite. So it kind of like is counterproductive to the very thing that we need in order to understand the current circumstances we're in and what is possible to do to get out of them. While PragerU is going to act like everything is fine. Actually, if anything, we need to fight all these leftists who want to make the world better, because they don't actually want to make the world better, and they're all evil Antifa super soldiers. I don't know. I think this is probably one of the worst things I've seen the right try to do in a really long time, because I think this is undermining like. It's a really good political like strategy, to be honest, to be fair, but it's awful because, like we said, Gen Z is the most radical, both left and right, right? That they're willing to get into radical politics. Thing is, we were having a good traction of them going left, but the moment that they're going to start educating all these kids with these right-wing talking points, we're going to lose that momentum, which is going to be destructive, and they're going to be like misinformed on so much, which we'll see play out in years afterward.
And the fight back has to be talking points from the left side that are easy to understand and connect with people's lives.
We should get PragerU out of schools too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's that of course. But even like kids going home on their own and watching like PragerU's Crowder, Shapiro shit.
But also, I think it's Oklahoma. I've talked to this with some other people, but I believe there's a John Oliver episode on it. And what happened is in Oklahoma, the fracking or oil lobbied the fracking or oil businesses lobbied the state government to reduce taxes on them. So to balance the budget, because states can't go into deficits, they took out spending from education and other parts of what states are supposed to fund. And because state spending is like second, it's usually about 20 to 30% of a school's fund. And that took a major chunk out of like what teachers could buy for their children. So in response to that, the oil and fracking companies bought resources for teachers, including the curriculum that they would teach kids, which was extremely pro-fracking and pro-oil. So even without PragerU, the oil companies are getting their propaganda put into schools.
Yeah, that's absolutely terrible, because the thing is, without this, the reason why the left can do really well when this doesn't exist is because we have like facts and academia on our side.
Facts on our side.
Yeah, if you look at like the truth about things, it usually is going to lean left, supporting whatever leftist sort of idea there is. And the only way that these people really get to combat that is by influencing how much misinformation is fed to these people. So it takes even more effort to be educated on these problems, which should be the absolute opposite of what the school is doing. Schools should be educating people correctly, factually. And if anything, that should end up aiding the left, because, like we said, we have facts on our side. So I just think this is like insane.
I think this way, we will see a much further movement right but I think the alt-right pipeline in a sense was kind of beneficial to the left, not as the existence of like people going far right, but for people getting radicalized and then before they reach the end, kind of having like a diversion caused them to go further left than they would have originally been. And that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm not saying alt-right pipeline good. No, it's not. It's not good idea. But once people get on the road to being radicalized, they're either going to be radicalized on the left or on the right. And I think it's much safer for society for people to be radicalized to the left.
Yeah, I hope that's the case. My only worry, though, is with this being within schools.
Oh yeah, definitely.
People are going to think that this is actual education, and the problem is the further from the truth you are, the harder it is to ever get to it. So if we start these kids with, right-wing propaganda that's just straight up false, there's a lot more these people have to learn in order to at all even be politically effective for the left. Even to know like what's actually happening. Like they'll be so far away from where they actually need to be that it seems very unlikely that these kids would end up at all being like leftist, because they have so much misinformation to go through, which takes a lot of effort. Which we don't even see today, people putting that much effort to doing. Like I said, like tons of people are apolitical. They don't care about that. And I only imagine putting the starting point even further right is not going to be very good.
Not good.
See,
not
I
good.
think like I used to be more into that alt-right pipeline shit, and I think the one thing that like pulled me out of it especially was takedowns of like the figureheads. That sounds so funny. You gotta take out the figureheads, but like some more news video on Ben Shapiro was more valuable than like any fucking leftist theory has been for me.
Yeah, I mean that was it for me too as well. I mean, I kind of went pretty far right. I didn't I'd say alt-light basically. And then I started getting into like leftist ideas. One time I heard like someone giving some race realism, and I was like, that's insane. So I started looking more left, and then I got into like the influencer realm of like leftist, and then it from there
the
it's just
leftology trap.
Yeah, and then it just led me down to being like a sock dem, and then I got more interested, and then I read all my own shit, and now
yeah,
here
we
I am.
fell in the leftology trap of talking about how we got here every single episode.
I think it matters though. Like, and I think I don't know, because I think recognizing what brought us here is helpful to bringing other people here.
Oh like no, I'm saying we say it every single episode.
Oh, y'all say it every single episode.
We said it the last episode. Yeah, we went to talked about it a little
back
bit.
when we streamed. Me, Kurt, and Alistair would basically say it like every other stream because somebody would ask for it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a problem with that because it is a very important thing to talk about, I think.
So whatever somebody's starter episode on, they're gonna learn how we got here.
I think like the reason why it's kind of important to look back on that though is just because if we're gonna say that people are gonna be educated further right because of PragerU, if we can't get them out of schools, which hopefully we find a way to do that. But if we can't for some reason,
avoid them getting into schools.
Yeah, but if we can't do that for some reason, we have to think about how are we gonna pull these people out of that misinformation. And the one thing I think people who were ever in the alt-right or alt-light or the right in general who moved to the left, the one benefit they have is seeing in what ways that was effective and learning from that and being able to build on that to bring all these people who are about to come out of school being further right than they probably have been previously and being able to pull them left.
I think we also need to be like tricking people that are on the right side into watching leftist videos. Like if you're talking about Venezuela and all the good things about Venezuela and then why it ended up failing, just a why Venezuela failed titled video and then like
like slipping in all the good things that Venezuela had.
Yes, and then being like in the end, the oil market crashed and that was their big nationalized industry, and so they couldn't fund all their programs after that.
It's kind of
now
like
RuneScape keeps their people alive.
It's kind of like the Richard Wolff thing where he like kind of explains market socialism without saying the word socialism. He's like, don't you think you should have democracy within the place that you spend most of your day?
Does he make YouTube videos?
There's like a bunch of clips of him like
there's a lot
speeches.
Of speeches.
See, I think taking his speeches and then like turning them into very digestible YouTube videos with very clear talking points. And that's what like Cam, we should work on this instead of doing music over this winter break. We should work
I want to release songs. I want to have stuff on my Spotify.
Fuck that shit. Fuck art, dude.
We have songs from March that aren't out yet.
Dude, I know. I honestly do. Like, I honestly want to like work with you to like take your essays and turn them into very concise talking points. His mom came in the room.
Yeah, we could definitely work on those videos soon. I might be able to do that tomorrow, or later today.
Yeah, because like
I think everyone should be making content.
There's not enough content that's like short form and that arms people with like talking points.
Well,
the first essay I have is 900 words. That's like 7 minutes.
The thing is that we can really look at the revolutionaries of like the 20s and 30s when communism and stuff was actually really having a fight, right? And one of the things they would do is they would write stuff to like normal people. Like they wouldn't hand them capital. They would write something that gave the basic ideas of
Communist
capital.
Manifesto.
Yeah, exactly. And like the thing is, the way we do that today is by putting stuff online. And I think like I encourage everyone to do it because I'm like, hey, if you can put stuff out there that's educating people, that's like getting leftist discourse out there, we should be wanting to dominate.
And then we can start our big evil capitalist business.
Yeah,
through spreading leftism.
I also think one thing we should take from the right is like every year or two, they will change like what name they use. They went from like just like openly being like the German 40s. I can't say the word because I want money. To like white nationalist to like race realist, like changing that. I think we should change, like go from communist to socialist. Let's call ourselves economic Democrats.
Oh economic democracy. Yes, actually. We're fighting for economic democracy.
Oh my god,
That would be
that's pretty good actually.
that would be a good one. Like you just completely separate yourself from the
'Cause
bad connotations.
I think because I think separating our from the word socialism would be impactful on bringing people over. Like you're saying with Richard Wolff, not talking about socialism, but talking about all the benefits of it, but not saying the word.
Yeah, and then at the end he pulls the whole like, hey, guess what? You agree with socialism, and they're all like, what? And like doing that like to everyone, being like, yeah, don't you agree with? I mean, I've done that at work too. I got like my manager to say like workers' rights, and he like lifted his fist or whatever. But it was because I like went around the word socialism, and I was like, hey man, don't you think you should just have more of a say in like this place that you spend all of your days at? And he was like, it's like, you know what? I should. And I was like, workers' rights, right? And it's like, yeah. And I was like, he has no idea that he just kind of agreed with like a socialist sentiment. Like that's hilarious to me. And he's like a right winger. Like I think he's gonna vote Trump. Like it's crazy to me.
Those are a lot of those people can be turned over as long as they're not like full on.
I think a lot of Trump supporters are just uneducated leftists. Like,
well,
I think
the thing is,
a lot of
them are working class, and Trump promised like helping them out. So they,
Yeah.
like a lot of conservatives promise helping those people. And the Democrats do that, but they do it in a different way, where they like focus on like the people who are like the most economically like destroyed, right? Which is fine. We should focus on those people, but they don't like
just
push.
Really bad at messaging.
Yeah, they don't push like working class rhetoric as well as Bernie Sanders did. That's why Bernie Sanders did so well. Is he pushed working class rhetoric, not just poor people rhetoric, which both are very important, obviously. Like and they intersect as well, but there's not as much focus on the working class, and that's what Trump did really well. Is his rhetoric was like super pro worker, which I think put a bunch of people in this like Trump pipeline. It's like, hey man, do you realize Trump didn't do anything for you like at all?
Yeah. And then they're like, nah, man, Trump built the economy up. Look, we got the greatest economy in history.
How's your
We've
paycheck?
already gone over that.
Well, but the thing is, their paychecks, a lot of them, I've had a lot of people say to me that their paychecks are slightly better because the Trump tax cuts.
Yeah. They're slightly better, but not as much as they could be.
But it's not their paychecks that are better. It's just there's less taken out of it.
Yeah. I don't want this podcast to go too much longer.
Oh yeah, we can cut it off. It's been like what, hour 20?
Yeah, but towards the end, I just wanted to say that we do need to do a lot of let me call myself again, but I think we need to take a lot of the tactics of the right, not like how they use them specifically, but how they're done. But I think a big one is that we need to control framing, because the right gets a lot of power in controlling framing. So I think with taxes per se, we do not view necessary private things such as insurance as taxes. We view them more of as expenses, because I don't understand why we view taxes as bad, but we view having to pay so much to insurance as okay.
Yeah, the short thing with like insurance is like everyone's like, I don't want to have nationalized healthcare because I don't want to pay for a poor person when they get hurt. But it's like you're doing that now. You're paying for someone else when they get hurt with your insurance.
Plus, it's probably more expensive too. And most economicists believe that Medicare for all is cheaper.
We need people to take the Medlock pill. Tax positivity.
Dude, this is what I've been trying to do. Everyone I talk to, it's like, why are taxes so bad? They build our roads, they educate our children. Taxes are pretty great, man. Why are you so against them?
For sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think this has been a really good conversation. Cam, let's talk about progressing these ideas.
I can record. I don't know if I should put this on air, but I can record this weekend before I leave to go back to college.
Don't you have a whole setup at your house?
I don't have a setup, but I brought my.
At your college campus. Yeah.
It's not great. I wanted to do more like outside stuff for videos, because a lot of people just like. ISO has this thing where he's just on his computer talking like this. Yeah, it's not a bad thing, but I do want to go.
I have my camera right here. I try to look at it sometimes.
Yeah, I do want to go like a high quality thing, like an outside like speaker.
Yeah. We can talk more about this later. Yeah, because I got a lot of ideas.
Yeah, and I do want to get some other people on a lot of different topics, but that's a long-term project, not something I need to be putting on here.
Yeah.
But it was great talking to you. I'm glad that I finally have a host that might be able to record regularly with me. And I'm
I
glad
should be able to.
Yeah, I'm glad
for-
you got a second host so you can put out more stuff.
Yeah.
Because I want to listen in.
Thank you to Isocratic here for being
Yeah, it was really good to meet you and talk to you.
Yes, you too,
guest
Patrick.
again. Go check
yeah.
out his channel. It should be in the description. If I failed to put it in the description, I'm sorry.
Please, I just hit 200.
You're not gonna fail.
I finally hit 200. We're getting there. 200 today, 200,000 tomorrow. All right.
Big dog, big bear over here.
Yeah. His videos are really good, so go please check them out. And thank you for tuning in.
Just adding a little bit to the end of this video, I just made a Discord. I'm going to put it down in the description, so feel free to join that and come hang out.